Many may see the controversy of using Native Americans as logos and names for sports teams to be no controversy at all. But after taking into consideration those who suffer from the negative portrayal and find it disrespecting, it's blatantly wrong to continue on with the tradition of using negative portrayals of Native Americans as names and logos for sports. In the United States, the usage of Native American names and symbols began in the late 19th century and early 20th century by university students. The names and symbols were used for the university's sports teams, but while doing so didn't authentically portray natives, but only as imaged by European Americans. As stated, in the 20th century, the usage of native names and terms began to spread across the country in high schools and colleges. And during the 20th century, there were what were at the time civilization regulations that prohibited Native Americans to practice their religions, speak their languages, and leave their reservations. So basically, real Native American Indians could now openly perform ceremonial dances when painted-up pretend ones could prance on sidelines, mocking the religious rituals of what a dominant white culture viewed as a vanishing red one. Once some universities started using Native Americans as their school/sports symbol, the movement of using Native Americans began to gain traction in pro sports. Now we'll look at just a few examples of sports teams that, quote-unquote, embraced the Native American image. In 1912, the Boston Red Stockings changed their name to Boston Braves, and today they are called the Atlanta Braves. As you can see, one of the first adaptations of the logos had what it appeared to be a chief with his skin toned bright red, going along with the concept of Native Americans being the Red Man. Today, the Atlanta Braves still associate themselves with the Native American image and a negative portrayal at that, but their present-day logo has changed. The derogatory word brave is still used, but instead of a bright red native, now we'll have a tomahawk, which is a very ritual item in Native culture. In 1915, another MLB team added to the Native American portrayal in sports with the Cleveland Indians. The Cleveland Indians had one of the most offensive logos in all of sports with Chief Wahoo. Chief Wahoo is depicted as another red man, native with the aquiline nose, which is deemed a distinctive feature of Native Americans, but more on Chief Wahoo later in the video. Another controversial team logo and name that was created was the Washington Redskins in 1932. Prior to name and logo change were known as the Boston Braves. As if the slander couldn't get any worse from brave, which emphasizes the savage stereotype and dehumanizes Native Americans, to redskin, which literally refers to the bloody scalps of many natives that were scalped by European Americans in return for bounty collections. To this day, the Redskins continue to associate that term with their logo name. As using negative portrayals of Native Americans in logos and symbols grew in the 20th century, we have to understand that these hurtful images and names came at a time when many Native Americans were conquered, forced into relocation, and had organized efforts to eradicate Native cultures from European Americans. Through boarding schools, which took young natives from their home and family and placed them in an environment where they were punished for their native culture and taught to kill the Indian and save the man. Some people that support the usage of Native American logos and symbols in sports argue that the names and images of natives are meant to be respectful as they quote-unquote focus on bravery, courage, and fighting skills rather than anything derogatory. The main counter-argument for executives of pro sports clubs on the controversy of Native Americans as logos and symbols is that the team names mean nothing but honor and respect. But how honorable or respectful is it really to continue displaying natives in a negative light after many have expressed their disliking and negative emotions towards it? Many Native people want their efforts and image to be presented with respect and integrity, but the images and names given to some sports clubs often flatten complex tribal, historical, and personal experience into one-dimensional representations. The main stereotype that is apparent in some of the logos and feeds into this concept is that Native Americans were bright red, ruthless savages that showed no mercy to their opponents as they were powerful and brave. However, many tribes only resorted to violence and retaliation or to protect what was theirs and were peaceful most of the time. The inauthentic behavior of Native logos and names make a mockery of indigenous cultural identity. In 1944, the National Congress of American Indians was founded in an effort to eliminate the negative stereotyping of Native American people in the media. However, as the negative images of Native Americans in the media started to dwindle, the NCAI geared their focus towards sports teams. As the presence of natives on logos, mascots, and symbols were still present, the NCAI disagrees with those believing Indian mascots honor Native people, as teams such as MLB's Cleveland Indians and Atlanta Braves, NHL Chicago Blackhawks, and NFL's Kansas City Chiefs and Washington Redskins were originated at a time when prejudice towards Native Americans was at a high, and not only that, but these teams continue to make a profit out those derogatory names and images. Names such as Braves, Indians, and Chiefs are greatly found in many schools and professional sports. Teams that still or did use a Native American image tend to have an idealized facial imagery of Indians as mascots, as well as mock Native cultural practices by doing war whoopings, tomahawk chops, and dances. While participating in such acts that mock Native American culture, it's rude and not respectful. At many games where there is a team with an Indian name, you can see fans get dressed up with war paint on their faces and just plainly red face paint. Why would people be okay or see no offense to red face? If there was a sports team that centered its name and images around African Americans, would it be okay or acceptable for fans of said team to participate in blackface? In the 1970s, protests against the negative portrayal of Native Americans started, but national attention didn't start gaining traction until the widespread television coverage of sports clubs associated with Native American names and logos. In 1991, the Atlanta Braves appeared in the World Series, and in 1992, the Washington Redskins appeared in the Super Bowl. And it prompted the largest response of backlash since both games were played in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and watched by the large Native American population there. Any appropriation of Native American names, images, or culture by non-Indigenous people is discriminatory and not regarded as an act of honor. These teams need to change their names, logos, or symbols as they're disrespectful towards Native Americans and their history. When it comes to other races or classes of people being depicted in sports, Native Americans have experienced the harshest portrayal. Today, there is numerous schools and professional clubs that have already changed their images and names and are doing just fine with their new, non-hurtful team image. That doesn't bring discrimination against Indigenous people. Such is the case with some professional sports clubs that have changed their name and logo. Teams are slowly but progressively taking Native Americans' feelings and thoughts into consideration, as is the case for the minor league baseball team, the Spokane Indians. The Spokane Indians organization worked with the local Native tribe on the issues of racial stereotypes or logos, and together came up with a new logo and uniform name. The Spokane Indians changed their logo from just SI to a red S in front of a baseball containing 2 eagle feathers. They also added a new uniform that says Spokane Indian Baseball Club, but in Salish. The goal was to pay homage towards the indigenous people by using a subtle but respectful image. Another recent case of a professional team taking into account many Native Americans' feelings and thoughts is the Major League Baseball team, the Cleveland Indians, as the Cleveland Indians removed one of their logos after 60 years of having it. That logo was a very controversial Chief Wahoo. In 2019, Chief Wahoo was removed completely from the team's hats, jersey, and logo. The team now uses C block letter for their hats. The state of Maine has become the first state to fully outlaw the use of Native American mascots in its public schools and colleges. Here we see 3 different responses to the controversy of Native American imagery in sports. First, we see a sports team consult and work with the local Native tribe in coming up with a new logo that isn't harmful and practically makes both parties happy. Next, we see a sports team scrap and be done with their very controversial logo and come up with a brand new logo that doesn't deal with the Native American culture. Then we see an action that outright bans any usage of Native American imagery in a whole state to steer clear of all controversy. But in the end, Indian mascots, logos, and stereotypes present a misleading image of indigenous people, and we need to get them corrected or get rid of them as they are derogatory, harmful, and should be out of our society, as there's no excuse in continuing a disrespectful tradition towards a very beautiful, rich, historical culture.